Would someone like to restate where we were?
Having a cup of coffee. Let's see, where were we? Oh, goodness. We voted on the outreach meeting.
We were going to talk about the agendas for the subcommittees.
Right.
So since we're on the subject of the outreach subcommittee, let's do that one first while everything is still relatively fresh in our mind.
So I would suggest that we find some broad categories with, you know, some specific examples, similar to the way that our agenda was, to give the subcommittees flexibility to discuss a lot of relevant topics.
I thought the comments that Commissioner Getty identified might be a nice way to start that conversation. I'm sure he keeps good notes, so I'm sure he could probably repeat some of them.
Let's see, we anticipate a subcommittee meeting to be how long? A couple hours, 3 hours, half a day?
I would suggest that we schedule them for, 3 hours, half a day, and schedule two at a time so that two
Right,
concurrently.
so 3 hours, half a day. I would imagine at most 3 or 4 agenda items would be,
Well, we may want to have some standing items. For example, I'm thinking of the Finance and Administration Committee, that we would probably want, review of contracts as a standing item.
Sure.
We may not have any to review, but
sure, let's stay with the outreach subcommittee. So we basically want the 3 broad category is what we're looking for in terms of agenda.
Well, the simplest one are, old business, new business.
I'm sorry, that doesn't work.
But anticipating that, that there's an opening process. As I mentioned earlier, there's a setup that happens ahead of the meeting. There's a call to order, and there's information. Let me.
How about the
restate.
first item being introduction?
Yeah. The introduction itself.
Right.
Then, as far as old business, it's always good to review what the committee has done before, and/or what direction we receive. As I'm looking at a permanent kind of standing agenda. What direction we received as a committee from the commission itself.
All right.
So that would kind of fall within
That's part of the
business.
introduction.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then any task, I think we've talked right now about, what is the format for having the hearings. That would be.
So format?
Yeah.
Structured format, framework.
One of the items, perhaps. One of the things that we also talked about was, what background information,
data.
do we need? What
Data
other
needs.
data there is.
Okay.
The other item was, what kind of pre-hearing outreach there has been out in that particular region. So those would be a couple of things that we would be discussing each time, anticipating that on an ongoing basis we're going to have these hearings. We're going to be talking about what we did before, what things we might need to tweak or change, and what anticipated challenges we might have in the future for the upcoming.
So I would put specific venues. That's something you should discuss. I have a question about the pre-hearing outreach, which actually I see as part of the media plan, which is part of the Public Information Committee.
Yeah.
We should probably distinguish there's probably input from one committee to the other committee.
Sure. Okay.
Translation? Would that
be a general category of special requirements, special
Yeah.
needs, something,
Yeah,
services,
yeah.
whatever.
You're right.
Maybe one of the broad category just could be
Access.
outreach planning, and I think that'll cover, it'll allow us to cover a lot of grounds with that one.
Did we say scheduling, kind of a proposed, how do we move through the scheduling of all the meetings?
I think scheduling should be included as one of the topic of discussion.
Maybe in
somewhere.
structure, format,
Right.
venues.
So we could use a category, very broad, outreach planning to include venues, schedule, structure and format. And special requirements for access, so i.e. translation. and- So we have two big categories.
One other thing that we discussed was, what I termed listening versus active listening. So we should discuss, what kind of recommendation we might want to make as far as how to conduct these hearings.
And how's that different from format?
It could be incorporated within that. My only point is that it's something that we should talk about.
Now, the broad category, the planning is one, the data collect, the data need is, I kind of consider that as another broad category. What would be the third one?
Was the third one actually kind of the first one that would be a review of what has gone before and adjustments?
I would say
Things learned
that
from-
could be included as part of the introduction
Oh, okay.
at the very beginning of any meeting.
Peter, I don't know if this is something that the subcommittee would talk about, but how are we going to publicize this meeting? I mean, publicity for the meeting is something I would consider as part of the outreach subcommittee task. I mean, we can hold the meeting, but if nobody knows, we're there.
I think that's a topic that applies to all the subcommittees, so maybe I can bring back some ideas to what we would do in the month of February,
Okay.
and then we can take on that topic at that point in time. Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to be sure that we got
Okay.
brought up because,
So
marketing is important, right, Vince?
You have to ask the chief marketing officer.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I actually saw.
maybe
that-
marketing should how to publicize the outreach meeting. I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah, I kind
misunderstood
I kind
the
of saw that
question.
as the Public Information Committee's job. I really see that as a PR and marketing committee.
Okay.
In other words, and tell me if you guys agree, that the Public Information Committee is more about what comes out from the commission and what we want people to know, so that's why the education piece would be part of the charter for the Public Information Committee. Whereas the outreach is all about how do we take in information, how do we receive input, how do we understand feedback.
Okay.
That's why I was saying they should
Yeah,
interact.
Yeah, they need to, my only point is they really need to interact, because even though there is a public information, I think there are going to be very, very key things that you want to convey in the public information about the outreach
Which
meetings,
was why there
about
should be
like
input.
what they're about, and, they're a little bit more precise than just letting people know something's happening,
Right.
so.
Why do we want you to come?
Yeah.
What will you get out of it by coming?
Well, in the outreach committee, subcommittee does need to give the communication committee an idea of who to communicate to.
Yeah, Peter, I would say this whole issue of the interaction of the committees, it would be up to the executive director to make sure that there's someone who's attending these meetings, any one of the meetings, who's making sure that that what's happening in other committees is brought forward when necessary, so that we don't get surprised by what one committee has done while we're working on another one.
Yeah, well, As we know, since all the committees are advisory only,
Yeah.
it will all be brought forward to the full commission and will put as a standing
Sometimes
agenda
it's
item.
easier to resolve some of those actions if you can do it while they're being discussed, rather than, finding out about it in the full session.
Yes.
Is it possible that when we've scheduled these briefer sessions for the subcommittees, that at the end we might take a few minutes to merge, for example, outreach and communications, just to kind of touch base on a few things, exchange some information, so when the presentation comes to the commission, both sides are already prepared with, the across-the-board issues?
All right, is that adequate information for the agenda, for posting of the agenda purpose?
Yeah, introduction, format of future meetings, data, future venues. Just a caution, remember, there can't be consulting outside of a meeting, within a committee or between committees.
Well, I think we can just bring the full commission together. I mean, we're
Oh,
already there
obviously,
anyway.
if you bring the full commission together, you can do that.
Yeah.
So
But
if
I was
somebody
referring-
about something outside the rules, if I know something's going on in another committee and I happen to be sitting there, am I prohibited from discussing that?
Not as long as it's agendized.
As long as it's covered by the agenda.
Okay.
And the fact of the matter is, again, just let me bring this up for you guys' consideration, since we're going to be doing a new agenda. And let me just read these words to you, because this is the way the Act reads, about how a subcommittee can piggyback. Notice of a meeting of state body that complies with this section, talking about the notice section of Bagley-Keene, constitute notice of a meeting of an advisory body of that state body. So in other words, an agenda of the full commission, which would cover the items a committee is going to talk about, provided the specific time and place, provided the business to be discussed by the advisory body is covered by the notice of the meeting of the state body, provided that the specific time and place of the advisory body's meeting is announced during the open and public bodies meeting, and provided that the advisory body's meeting is conducted within a reasonable time of and nearby the meeting of the state body. So if, in other words, just to show my grasp of the obvious, if you have an agenda of the full commission, as we do now, that's pretty broad and encompassing, that can constitute the agenda of the committee. It doesn't mean you don't have to have a committee agenda, or you're precluded from it, but you can be covered. And then what can happen is at the meeting, the chair, for example, could advise, now our subcommittee on outreach is going to be meeting in room, or in this room, or room 1415 at 10:30 or whatever like that. As long as that's reasonably close, and I sort of think a good rule of thumb would be, can you walk to it without blisters? And people, in other words, people are there, can get there. Then you're covered. So just to keep that in mind when we're doing agenda items. You need to tell people what you're about, but again, you don't want to be so specific that you limit yourself. And we did that. I think you did a great job with the agenda that we've got now, because it's broad enough, and nobody's misinformed, but it gives you that. Okay.
Yeah, and I would think we would need these bigger items on the main commission agenda anyway, since they will, subcommittees will come back and report on these items, so.
Okay, are we ready to go to the next subcommittee?
I actually would like to be a little more specific and see if we can include things like milestones, milestones and budget for each committee. When do you, what are you actually accountable for as a
So
subcommittee?
under planning, maybe we can add a couple more words to it. Tasks, schedule, milestones.
And budget.
we ready to go to the next subcommittee, or does the commission want to stay on this topic a little longer? All right, who wants to be the next subcommittee? Which subcommittee do we want to discuss next?
We can do comm, communications. As far as agenda items, again, I guess my list doesn't qualify. These would be more items of discussion. But obviously, we need to discuss taskings for the communications director. That would entail some milestones and budget, staffing for the comm director, ideas on background and fact sheet production for the CRC, press release items, identify some of those, and give the communications director some direction on that. Creating a media liaison list, equipment needs for the communications department, as well as discussing information vehicles that are available for us, and that includes awareness and promotion of upcoming events and outreach events, and then format for and future meeting schedule. Is there any other thoughts?
I believe we included the education aspect of it as part of the communication. Maybe you should add something associated with the education. We briefly discussed bringing in advocacy groups and also subject experts for the entire commission. So you may want to include that as part of your agenda item.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. So that's not part of communication going out and communication coming in. Is
What happens at a public meeting is what,
just
part of
bringing
what
in
goes out.
speakers for educational purposes and stuff. We'll put under communication going out. Okay.
And I would just say probably a lot of these fall under the general category of media planning. And I would add, ethnic media outlets to that list. And this is actually something we'll expect our new communications director to actually come up with, and we're just providing oversight and input and philosophy around.
Very good.
I think we discussed it, maybe I missed someone saying this, a system regarding when we get requests for speakers, some sort of training. I don't know, maybe we have a rotating schedule. We'll let the communications director help us out.
Media training.
At lunch, some of us were discussing, I don't know at what point this would come up, but the whole issue of how we frame, what the mandate, in a sense, is around the Voting Rights Act. What language we were thinking that, for a lot of people, if there's a situation where a line is weird looking, or there's something's not nested, or whatever, something looks gerrymandered, and it's really the result of us complying with the affirmative duty to try and maximize minority-majority districts. That concept of maximizing majority-minority districts is not only kind of a little esoteric, but I think there's going to be, I don't know, there may be resistance to that notion of why should the law worry about electing people of your choice? I thought we were beyond that in this country. We're post-racial, I'm serious. I just think this is, and we were saying, walking back from lunch, that it would be interesting to try and think about how we talk about that in ways that resonate with people about sort of very American values that are fundamental, so that that, not only so that we don't, we're always going to get pushback about what we do, but it's also kind of a process of educating people about the law, about democracy, what are its tenets, and why there's a Voting Rights Act. But so I don't know if this is too big, but I do think somewhere in our work as subcommittee or somewhere, we should have this as something we're really trying to figure out as part of our communication strategy.
Yeah, I think that not only that, I think if we could find the 2-minute presentation or 2-minute written form as to what are the considerations that the commission has to take into account when they do these draw lines. And so why don't the laws, I mean, I've had people say, why don't you just slice the state across, straight lines straight across, and each one just stack them up. I mean, I've literally had that suggestion made to me. And so I think that a mechanism by which we can explain to the public, because that's a lot of what we're here to do, is to explain to the public as to what are the constraints and why. I mean, maybe we shouldn't view them as constraints. Maybe that's a negative word. Yeah. But rather, why are we doing what we're doing? Yeah. In a format or several formats that the public can have. And because I think it will add to the merit of the comments that they make, because they will hopefully, having read this or looked at this, will make comments that will be directed towards some of these things that we have to take into account.
I think both your ideas are fantastic points for a fact sheet that would be available just like literature is currently for all attendees, that has a multitude of fantastic educational points like that. What is the commission? What is Prop 11? Like you said, what considerations or criteria are used by the commission? There'll be a number of things, but that's part of what the subcommittee will talk about. So that's great input. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to add elevator pitches for the commission, because all of us are going to have to explain extremely complex, redistricting law and concepts to people who, may not know anything about it. So we want to empower the commission with that. I'm going to, add web and social media strategy, because that will be, we're not going to be necessarily just printing fact sheets, but this will, having a useful website from a content perspective that will allow people to learn on their own time, which I think would be very important.
So I kind of interpret the broad category. Again, introduction would be one of them, this way you can share whatever background information. Priority task for communication director, I guess maybe that would be a category. An education plan, again, a few more bullets following that. Media training, media plan would be perhaps another category. Communication strategy, again, web, media, those are subcategories. That's a lot of categories. Anything else?
There are probably two categories. There's really media planning and education.
Right, I have
all of the
that.
others can be subpoints of those.
All right, introduction, media plan, education plan, anything else? All right, let's go to the next subcommittee then.
I do technical. I would suggest that we need reports, in this case probably from consultants, on the preparation for access to initial approximations of the 2000 data, so we get an idea for what we will be getting in April. Then the preparation, what are the preparations for receipt of the census information and its eventual placement in a redistricting system. Training for commissioners, both in the strategies of redistricting as well as in the software that would be available. Then the availability of timing and availability of information and training for citizens to use the census information in available software.
So I would say selection of software and consultants is the major task for this.
Yeah.
What is, a selection of,
Software and consultants.
As the main aspect, or is? Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, but is that in addition to what the Commissioner
Yeah,
Brown
that would
said
be in
before? Yeah.
addition to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard the comment. Could you repeat? No.
Cynthia suggested that in addition to the four that I identified, there would be the selection and choice of the consultants.
Software and consultants, yes.
I wouldn't call them software consultants. I would say redistricting consultants.
Do we need to talk about the technical requirements that are needed for any outreach meetings or meetings outside of Sacramento? Or is that too much, is that?
I think that's on the border of the technical committee's intent, which is to really focus on getting the redistricting done.
That was my question, whether it
Yeah.
was more staff.
I would think that technical would be more associated with the outreach or the public information.
You don't want it, basically.
But this will be enough.
I think.
what were your first two? I'm sorry.
Preparation for access to initial approximations of the 2,000 data. And then the second was preparation for the receipt of the census information.
I'm not sure exactly where this fits in here. It may be under communications, it might be under public information, might be under outreach, but I find it useful to have like a PowerPoint presentation or graphics to accompany our presentations, to have something that's ready-made in a nutshell so that we can get a visual. I don't care, DVD, whatever form that might take. But we need some we need something to at least have in our suitcase in case we need to pull that out while we're at a meeting or a hearing or talking to a variety of people who may not be up to speed. That takes the burden of us having something like that introductory. Gives us time to set up, gives us time to get our notes together, gives us time to do a little bit of homework on the demographics and some of the statistics of the area we're speaking at. It gives us a little time.
Are you suggesting a template or a standard kind of about us kind of presentation?
I think a template would suffice from the beginning. A template.
I think
with
this is an
standard
excellent
information.
first job for the communications director.
Yeah, I would say this would be an interaction between the two committees, and we'd want to not have
It's
the
actually a
tech-
staff role, I
Yeah.
mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Prepare something on that level for our use. So it would be audio visual. products.
Yeah, hold on, I just want to.
In fact, that whole issue, we might want to start thinking from the communications aspect of using some viral technologies. Getting a nice simple approach up on YouTube or something like that could go a long way to prepare people for what we're talking about.
And on that, I don't know how this factors into that, but there are going to be a lot of competing things up on the web and on websites. There's all kinds of programs that have already been developed by, including some people who have presented to the commission and others, and as we know, part of it's an industry, but, well, maybe not so much now that the legislature is not doing it, the industry may have.
The monetary reward
Is no longer there. But still, I think there are a lot of competing, there are going to be competing interactive sites, and I don't know what that means, but I think that we should be aware, we should track them, I guess is what I'm saying, because some of them, I've already seen some methodologies, and there are concerns about some of the methodologies that are being promoted.
Maybe a fifth activity, a sixth activity would be then to monitor alternative methods and presentations.
So on that particular item, you're proposing to monitor as many of these different methodologies that individuals are promoting to do redistricting, is that correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't say every one that's out there, but ones
Okay.
that seem relevant to what we'd be doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no way we could track everything that's going on out there, but ones that come to our attention that we should be aware of.
Okay.
And one of the reasons it becomes important is not because we want to be the final word and everybody else's method is, but there will be a lot of other people doing outreach hearings, and then doing exactly what we're talking about, then going back and presenting maps that they've drawn. I mean, this is what this coalition, the APOC, MALDEF, LDF coalition will do. Our audience is going to be potentially, not bombarded, but potentially faced with competing scenarios, and that may affect how they testify even to us. And I don't know really how we feel about that. Maybe we just don't care. It's just, it is what it is, and we do the best job we can. And maybe we shouldn't care, but I do think that we will be getting questions from audience members, particularly at the point where people are commenting on our maps, that will be influenced by the fact that there's others around.
Yeah, one of the things we might think about as we're monitoring then is how compatible that approach might be, so that we could run it through our system if we saw something that we liked, and then that way we'll be at least sure that the numbers are consistent. So that might be part of our rationale for monitoring alternatives.
Right, and part of it is just awareness, that we're aware that there are three kind of major, approaches for redistricting this area. And if we're going to be defending our maps at some point, we need to understand why we made the decisions we did.
All right, just as a process check, do we have enough broad categories to cover everything that the technical subcommittee want
That would keep a committee
to discuss?
busy. Yes.
All right, next subcommittee?
I guess I'll go with legal, but I'll preface by saying I don't know anything about this committee. And I'm really wish Jody were here. So, very...
Interrupting, and I apologize. Can Dan read back to you the items so that we know what you know, or we both think we're on the same page?
So what I have now are strategies and software for redistricting, ability of citizens to use the software. A major part of this task will be to get the consultants on board, that you wish to have some type of PowerPoint presentation, a template to begin with, and that you want to make sure that we're tracking other relevant methodologies that are being used. What did I miss?
Another one would be is preparation for the approximate approximations of what the data will look like, so we can get started before the numbers show.
So I've got that. I didn't read that one. It was above, but
Okay.
Absolutely.
By comparison to the other subcommittees, I think this set of agenda, if we were to agendize it in a manner that was read, I think they tend to be a lot more detailed, a lot more restrictive. So between now and next week, maybe we find a way to broaden it so that you can cover unanticipated topics that are in the same category.
else here, excuse me, is on the legal? Is you, right now, you and me present here? Okay. I am. Who else?
I am, and Michael.
Michael.
Okay, all right.
But that
Just so you know, I didn't put it down on my final list.
Yeah, I was going to say that might change after we
Change.
kind of look at what
Okay,
people's
but
final
the-
choices
All right, just, I say that because, help me here, because I really wasn't here for the thinking process of setting up the committee at all. So I guess, this is, all of these committees are anticipated to be ongoing, is that correct? And so the legal is ongoing.
Right.
But for, I want to make sure that for next, okay, so we have to prepare the questions for the hiring
Correct.
of council. And I'm not sure if that's, how that should take place. I mean, I don't know if that's a subcommittee noticed. I don't think it is.
No, it's going to be too late by then.
It's going to be too late to notice it. So I don't know, though, if we want to make an announcement, or if that's just on the website and that's that.
About,
No, it's a closed
About
session.
it's a closed session.
It's a closed session.
So
Yeah.
that's that. Okay. So, so many of these to me relate a little bit to the technical and, but one thing's obvious is that we'll be working really closely with council. And so I think every meeting should, my sense is that every meeting should include both an update from him about, him or her, about what their, outstanding either questions that have come up or decisions that he or she feels need to be made, or so a GC report would be one standing item. Is that right? I think to the extent that in our full commission meetings, things come up that are not so much of the nature of something that the general counsel will be deciding, but things that come up about, let's say we are now deep into the map drawing, and we have a discussion. The commission feels it needs guidance. I think we need to figure out which items are for our general counsel and which ones.
Well, I would.
That's why I'm sort of saying I'm kind of ad-libbing, because I don't think we've really had, it's a little different than the others because we have this position, which is a very high-level position.
So
to assist us. So what do we do that's not really the role of the general counsel is kind of.
I think, two things that come to my mind that we actually talked about earlier today is a discussion of what are the legal issues about which we need training, in which the commission needs training.
Identifying legal training needs.
Exactly.
There we go. I also want to remind the commission that Commissioner Filkins-Weber provided a list of agenda items at the last meeting, so you could review that. I know that policies are one of her concerns, for example, public records retention policies and things like that, that we may need to be concerned with, other items that may.
If somebody has a copy of, or have that list, maybe it would be
That would be helpful. 'cause I don't
appropriate
have
to
that.
share with
Yeah.
the
Yeah, because I haven't.
all the
I
commissioners
didn't
at this
stay up all
point.
night
Do you have a
reading the
copy
transcripts.
of that, Cynthia?
Does somebody have that handy? Is this from which transcript? I'm sorry.
Would have been Fridays.
Would have been Fridays?
Yeah. So I don't think we need to go through that again
So
here.
I'll just, the thing is, there's some things that, I'm not so sure, frankly, that the subcommittee needs to be drafting the records retention
No, just providing oversight.
policies.
I mean,
Right.
I think I just want to be clear that all these subcommittees are going to be working with staff. So, I mean, we're going to be providing oversight and brainstorming and policy direction, but the staff will be doing their jobs.
So oversight of the commission's legal responsibilities. Okay.
You know, that's probably a broad
Broad enough
category that we should include
Yeah.
in each and every subcommittee. Can
Yep.
someone draft a couple words so that it can go into all the agenda as a standard item?
So, okay, we'll do,
You
Do
might
we
want to
wanna
include
build in a-
oversight, I'm sorry, you might want to include something about oversight and recommendations, so there's no ambiguity about whether or not you're making decisions.
oversight and recommendation. Review. How's review? Does that imply decision-making, or is?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, I have not come up with the language, it just occurred to me.
I agree.
But we want to make clear that it's
Yeah.
a committee that makes recommendations to the commission.
Okay. How, it strikes me that there might be some things that happen during the course of this, our work, court decisions, whatever, that the subcommittee should look at and prepare a presentation for the full commission?
I think that is a start, too, to the other issue we talked about, which was anticipating possible challenges that we would face at the end of the process. Excuse me. So keeping up and making sure that we're kept informed and anticipating.
Okay, so the subcommittee's role is to keep the commission apprised of relevant legal issues related to redistricting? Okay.
Well, I'm not so sure we want to put the responsibility to keep the commission apprised, because that's what we're paying council to do, I think. So if we could phrase it a little differently so that, that we're making sure council is on top of these things, or that we're also looking at it in not just as an abstract legal issue, but in the context of what we're doing day to day.
May I suggest legal strategies?
Or legal matters, not redistricting.
matters.
Don't want to leave it to
Keep the
redistricting, because it may
Keep the
be,
commission,
Apprised of legal matters.
I mean, I think there are all kinds of legal matters, like we're going to have a staff,
Yeah.
there might be employment law issues. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole host of legal issues that our chief counsel may want some input from a small number of commissioners
keep
on.
the commission apprised of legal matters related to the workings of the commission. Okay. Yes. So the first one is a report, a standing item that would be a report from the general counsel. Two, identifying legal trainings for the commission. Review of commission's legal obligations as a standing item. Keeping the commission apprised of legal matters related to the workings of the commission. That was the last one. And I think those are fairly broad, and I just want to make sure that in the spirit of broadness, there aren't some very specific things that we're overlooking that are coming up, or, that aren't just the role of the GC.
Would you
Okay,
see
let's go on.
policies?
Let's go on to the last.
I'm not done yet.
You're not done
Would you
yet.
see policies as part of oversight and review about the commission's legal obligations? Because I think we might want to have.
Standing policies about
Yeah,
whatever.
because, I mean, our chief counsel is going to provide advice on the
Right.
law, but there may be choices in some cases, and that's where I would see the role of the committee, is really providing policy direction.
Yep. Okay, policy review.
to include such matters as ex parte communications,
Right. E.g., ex parte communications. Structure of hearings. I mean, there may be some legal matters involved, or I don't know.
I don't think we have to list them.
Okay, so, but if we're going to do an
Get that
EG,
specific.
I'd rather not do one EG.
What about legal policies?
Review of legal policies. Okay.
Legal policies
Policies.
in reference to the Voters' Rights Act
No,
specifically?
just in
for this
general.
whole
No, in general.
I think general is better.
Yeah, you want to keep it as general as you
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
because
yeah.
you can't anticipate, I mean, you could, but then you've got a laundry list of things which is fairly useless. I mean, the legal
No, I
challenges
think
can come
I
up.
think the only one here that's really specific, and I think it needs to be, is the legal trainings.
Yeah.
And the others are, yeah.
Well, could that last one come under the category of something like compliance?
Oh, yeah, compliance review. Legal compliance review. I like that. Okay. Anything else?
Can we ask that you read them back now?
Yep.
For Dan?
The General Counsel report, identifying legal trainings, legal trainings for the commission, just to be clear. Review of commission's legal obligations. 4, keep the commission apprised of legal matters related to the workings of the commission. That could probably be shorter.
Legal matters.
We have, well, I don't know what the difference is between review of legal matters and legal obligations, but we could just say review of legal obligations and matters, if we want.
All right.
Okay, we'll shorten that, and then final, legal compliance review. How's that?
Okay, so GC policies are in the realm of the legal obligation and matters, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will share this also. I've got to call Jody about the questions for the interviews, so I'll get her input on this as well. But I don't want to keep broadening it too much.
All right, I believe the remaining one is Finance Administration.
Finance and administration, to be clear. So obviously, reviewing budget. So budget projections, everything related to the budget. Looking at additional appropriations from the legislature and other sources as necessary.
I'm sorry, what was that again, the last second?
Looking at the augmentation of the budget.
Thank you.
I would add staffing and personnel. Similar to the budget, kind of a catch-all staffing and personnel category. I was also thinking if we needed a category related to IT, and maybe we could collapse that under some other meta category, and then a question around facilities management, given we will have our facility here, and yet we will be in many facilities over the coming months.
I would add contracts for all the above.
Evaluation of meeting facilities.
Yes.
Well,
let me expand on facilities, so we can expand it to facilities and equipment.
Need a clarification on that. We're talking about the costs associated with facility and equipment. Are we talking about facility and equipment?
Yes. Blackberries, whatever the staff has to buy to meet our needs.
The costs associated with it, and not necessarily the management of it.
No. It's just the cost. I mean, we have to budget for that.
Right.
I had actually anticipated as somewhat of a separate item, but if we have a catch-all category around budget, we could look at fiscal issues there, but we also need to be thinking, just logistically speaking, what kind of facilities are we going to be needing at any given time? Making arrangements to borrow offices or auditoriums or et cetera.
I would see this as mostly a staff function. I mean, we can certainly review it.
And you have facilities management as one, don't you?
Yeah. Well, it's facilities and equipment. I mean, I think that we need to remember that we're a governing board here, so we're going to have staff. I see the Public Information Committee as a resource for the communications officer. I see the Finance and Administration Committee as a resource primarily for the executive director. The Legal Committee would be a resource for the chief counsel, to bounce ideas off and make policy decisions, policy recommendations to the full commission.
I think this commission will come into being when we identify an issue and then start thinking about some of the potential options and then bring it before the entire commission for consideration. I don't believe the normal monitoring and reporting of expenditure to be part of the activity other than just reviewing it before they're brought forth to the entire commission. All right. Let's see, let me ask council for clarification. If we do have a subcommittee meeting on Wednesday, February the 9th, do we need to post the agenda as at either close of business day or 11:59 p.m. on the Wednesday, 2 weeks before the 9th, or has it to be the Tuesday before the Wednesday of February the 9th?
Always an interesting question. I would advise you to do it Tuesday.
So can we post it at close of business or at before midnight on Wednesday, 2 weeks before the February the 9th?
I just want to clarify this because we posted information.
Did we do 2 weeks?
We did 2 weeks.
Then I think you're fine with that.
Yeah, because we did last Friday, and we're going to discuss 3 new items this Friday.
So if they posted 2 weeks before, you're good.
So as long as we post that 2 Wednesdays before February the 9th, we are in compliance
Yeah.
of the...
Yes.
All right, so that being the case, why don't we have a draft copy of the agenda for each of the subcommittees to be reviewed before the entire commission on Wednesday, February the 9th. I'm sorry, next Wednesday,
Next
which
Wednesday.
is January the 26th?
Now, let me just ask a kind of a clarifying question. 2 things. At the end of trying to answer this agenda question, let me ask if we can go back and reread finance so that we all have the same words.
All right.
My thinking was to do one agenda, which included both the commission.
That's fine.
Yes.
And
That's
the
fine.
subcommittees, and perhaps to have in italics that the subcommittees' agendas include the specific items listed under each subcommittee and any matter listed for the entire commission. That's in accord with the law, and it gives you that flexibility.
Sounds
And
great.
that the subcommittees will meet in a location close to where the committee is, as a whole is meeting, and that will be announced on Wednesday morning or before, something like that.
Something like that.
So we're looking at three subcommittee meeting locations, or two plus the main.
Well, that'll be up to you. I mean, if, you know, you can't conduct a commission meeting and a subcommittee meeting at the same time anymore. I mean, you can, but it's not worth anything. You probably won't have. for
So
someone you
staff
don't
would
even
try
have a-
to come up with the,
So we need one location for each subcommittee. You can use the committee as a whole for one subcommittee if you want.
all right,
and-
maybe this is a decision for the entire commission to make. Do we want at most two parallel subcommittee meetings, or do we want up to five parallel subcommittee meetings?
I feel like this is largely going to be based on who is on each committee.
I understand. So
Do
if we want to, for example, if we want to limit it to no more than two subcommittees to meet, then we can schedule it accordingly, or try to come up with a schedule that will satisfy as many commissioners as possible.
So
I guess my point, I'm sorry, let me just finish my thought there, was that in the interest of efficiency, if it was logistically possible that all the meetings were happening concurrently, I would be fine with that. However, there may be a commissioner who wants to be on two subcommittees that would, so I feel like, is that a possibility? Maybe staff can actually do some work to figure out, propose, based on the list of who's interested in what committee, what our options would be?
I think Mr. Claypool has that preliminary list already. We perhaps can make decision on that when we get back together again, but we can do that right now if it's our desire.
I was going to propose that I'll work with Dan before the next meeting to kind of sort the list a little bit, because what we'd like to do is, we asked everyone to put 3 choices, and we want to make sure everyone gets at least their, first or second choice, and then balance the numbers a little bit. Understanding that, of course, everyone is welcome to participate as needed, but we kind of want to get some core groups going.
Is it all right if we come back next Wednesday to work that out?
Yes.
Or would you like to take time out now to discuss it?
I'd say we come back next week after Commissioner Dye's had an opportunity to work with Mr. Claypool and trying to see what type of meeting schedule would minimize the amount of overlap of commissioners that want to sit in multiple committees.
Claypool?
I was going to point out that it is going to take some time to juggle this. Clearly, 5 consecutive are impossible. So it's going to have to be some staggered amount and then a lot of cooperation.
So let's try to shoot for at most two parallel meetings. Is that because we're basically talking a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours per subcommittee meeting. So in a given day, we can probably squeeze in 3 sessions. 2 easily, 3 would be a challenge, a small challenge.
So on the chance that somebody is not, well, the likelihood really that some people will not be on the 2 things that are scheduled, then any 2 commissioners who are not occupied in subcommittee meetings could talk without any problems, right?
In fact, you can jump back and forth between 2 committees if one wants to do that. I don't think there's any restriction in terms of...
But I was thinking of people who aren't on the committees that are meeting. So, I mean...
Also, one point of clarification, there are probably some people who only want to serve on one subcommittee, which I think is more than fine. So if you only want to serve on one, maybe you can send a note to Dan to clarify so that we don't put you on 2. Because,
Your first choice?
yeah.
I think Commissioner Reyes question is a good one. Maybe we can take a minute to address it. We sort of set a upper limit of 6 commissioners for each of the subcommittee. Can we just have an understanding saying the first 6 can participate in the active discussion, and beyond that, the commissioners will be in a listening mode to avoid accidentally getting into a situation where it's so cumbersome that it's impossible to hold a subcommittee meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I proposed a maximum limit is just the whole idea of a subcommittee is to give people a chance to get more airtime. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, commissioners who are not otherwise, obligated to attend another subcommittee meeting, if they want to sit in and spend their time doing that, that's great.
I know the scenario I'm used to is that basically the 7th commissioner can behave like the public and can address the commission in terms of, but you can't participate in the continuous discussion of the topic. I don't think we necessarily have to totally adhere to that. The first 6 commissioner can certainly ask questions, and you can participate in that manner. So there are ways to capture both the public and your thought in that process. So we have enough flexibility in doing that. Mr. Claypool, you have a comment?
My comment was only that we are approaching 4 when we were going to do
Understand.
anything, and we still have the.
I understand. All right, I think Mr. Claypool has an item that he would like us to consider before the end of our meeting today.
Can I read back now? Finance and administration. I have budget, staffing and personnel, IT, facilities management, contracts and equipment. That may not be right. That's what I got. That's why I wanted to check.
Yeah, so I've budget and budget augmentation, I would put as one, staffing and personnel. I don't know if contracts needs to be a separate line item, or whether it's understood. I just, wanted, for example, we had to approve 3 contracts today, and it would be good if, we had a group of commissioners who had read that thoroughly and thought about them, so. And then IT and facilities and equipment, we didn't want facilities management in there. That would be staff's job.
Facilities and equipment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we lump them maybe into logistics, and that could be a catch-all for, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we could lump the whole thing under operations, and that would catch everything.
Which is really the purpose, to have a catch-all category that allows flexibility.
Sure, should we put operations? I just want to point out this is getting very broad.
Well, I think you have enough information to put together a draft agenda, so we can take up the details this coming Wednesday. All right, Mr. Claypool, let's go on to the item that you want to put before the commission.
We have the 2 final positions, public information officer and the administrative assistant. I was hoping that it would be, with the commission's permission, that I would select the administrative assistant. It's down to 3 qualified people, and I've arranged to have those interviews on Monday so that we can get that going. The second one is public information officer. Amongst the many candidates and mostly qualified candidates, the predominant number of them were governmental and Sacramento based. They weren't. They didn't have a broad reach across the state. Only 4 of the individuals actually had the broad reach that that I believed you wish to see, and the depth of experience that I believe you want. I want to know, first of all, would there be an objection to a candidate being a person that had been considered by the legislature as one of the possible 60 commissioners? They were in the final pool that went. This individual was in the final pool that went to the legislature. Would that was the pool we were all in. Right.
So they were stricken from the pool at that point?
I don't know. I looked at it and I didn't do that. I
I
just,
think the question is, were they part of the final 36 or were they part of the final 60?
I know the individuals said part of the final 60, but I didn't check to see if they were stricken.
Well, if they weren't stricken, then that means they're still in whatever subcategory, because they're not here, so that makes a difference whether they're in the, it's not 36, whatever's left of 36 at this point, or if they were just struck by legislators.
My sense would be if they were made the final 60, they got through a pretty good review process of the panel, so therefore there shouldn't be any problem with retaining them. And then if
If it would be whether they would want to give up the potential for future sitting on the commission.
they would have to make that judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, right now, the only, right. Right, somebody else could resign, and if the person's in the Democratic pool, they would be giving up a spot, a chance at being a commissioner. Are there any concerns about being struck by the legislature?
No, not for me.
That was pretty clear.
There but for the grace of God.
Mr. Claypool, if we request that the resumes of your selection of the final four be made available to the commissioner so we can decide for ourselves as to whether there are any issues that we see, and assuming that we give you a go-ahead, then you can make the choice among the remaining candidates that pass our screening process. Would that be a process that would be acceptable to you? Or?
Certainly. I mean, I'm amenable to whatever process you wish. If that would expedite it, but if you decide after screening them you wish to interview them, however you want to do it.
I don't think we're talking about participating in the interviewing, but I think perhaps that'll allow us to satisfy ourselves that the four that you're going to pick from indeed, quote unquote, made our expectation. Is that a would that process be acceptable to the commissioners?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify, this is for the communications director position?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have a question. Do you have any thoughts about why the pool was not qualified in the way that we wanted it to be, that had the kind of statewide or more sophisticated experience? Is it our salary range or how we got out the notice? I'm just curious.
As with many things, that you would have expected a preponderance of the candidates to be from Sacramento because they would have assumed that is where the position is, and so it's a great job. And so that's why you received so many individuals who were public affairs officers for commissions and for the Senate and for the Assembly. So it was with that type of experience. But you did receive a fair number that came from a distance, so your outreach did at least go out that far. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you.
So just out of curiosity, do you feel like the pool is large enough and you have enough qualified candidates to choose from?
I believe that there are candidates in this the group that I will send you that are well qualified.
So specifically, you are to send the resume to all of us, and I don't know what kind of schedule can we commit to. Hopefully, we can get back to Mr. Claypool in a day or two. Monday?
After the weekend.
Yeah, Monday, and voice any opinion you may have directly to him as you see fit, and then let Mr. Claypool make the decision from there. If any one of you has strong objection against one candidate, then maybe have Mr. Claypool discuss with the chair and the vice chair, and then make the appropriate decision from there. I, for one, would not be interested in participating in the interview process, and I like to task the executive director to make the proper decision, make the proper selection. Any difference in approaches that you want to suggest?
Any commissioners who would like to participate in the interviewing process?
When will it be?
Next week. As soon as you get them up, right?
I'm interested in, obviously, seeing the list and input just like everybody else is. I think that the avenue is there for input, so
Yeah.
I think it's pretty well settled.
All right, you have enough direction from us on that?
Yeah, I do. I'll take the direction, and I will get them out to you today. I expect comments back by Monday, and then as long as there are no substantial objections, I will try to get them scheduled Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday.
All right, close of business Monday. Let's go ahead and set that deadline then.
And then we can make the decision.
Okay?
I have a question. I'm just going to channel Jody here about the conflict of interest thing. Did you run into any issues with the finalists there? Based on applying our conflict of interest rules?
No, there was one individual in 1990 had, yeah, so that was it.
Yeah.
Could I ask counsel to chime in on this conflict of interest and advise the executive director accordingly, specifically associated with this position of communication director?
No, I'd be happy to do that. We can discuss the apps.
Right. I think that approach will likely address any conflict of interest issue that we may have.
And the only reason, this is one of the positions that I would be concerned about because, yeah, of appearances, so.
Yeah.
All right. Any other items on the agenda that you wish to address before? Go ahead, Mr. Ward.
There's a letter that was given to the commission from the California legislature regarding offering to meet, and I wanted to thank the Secretary of the Senate, Gregory Schmidt, for finding ways to support our mission of ensuring equal representation for all Californians. Now, although I understand there might be some perception concerns for the panel, I think the commission ought to seriously take a look at this letter and discuss it, consider the practicality of its offer. The Capitol building is open 7 days a week and itself is a visible symbol of democracy. Mr. Schmidt has offered us multiple plug-and-play ready rooms to meet our technological needs, as well as a non-overtime cap staff to assist in technological operations. This offer offers more flexibility and public access than we have currently. The cost savings to the people and the commission could be used to further outreach efforts. So for all those reasons, I believe we should graciously consider this opportunity as a panel.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I would like to make a motion that we consider accepting this request.
Mr. Claypool?
I apologize. I thought I was trying to signal before the motion that it's okay.
You need a
I
second, so I'll second.
just wanted to say, just to recognize that this came from Greg Schmidt, Secretary of the Senate, and Jonathan Walde, Chief Administrative Officer of the Assembly. It was jointly signed by both of them, and just wanted to be sure we recognize that this was a joint effort.
Very good.
You need a second, so I'll second it.
All right, it's moved and second. Any further discussion?
I think it would be great for if we do outreach in the Sacramento area.
I too agree that this is a very generous offer, and and I can think of no reason other than thank them and accept their offer. So let's have a show of hands of those who would support the motion of accepting the California Legislative's offer of us using their meeting facility.
Are we just saying generally in terms of the motion, or there's not something specific related to outreach versus business? Okay.
Additional comments?
Did we make a formal motion regarding the offer that we got from the city of San Jose? No. Okay. I'm wondering, so I'm happy to vote on this motion. I think these types of offers will begin coming in fairly regularly, so if we are going to make a decision on this piece, I would like to make a motion next regarding the San Jose letter.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the San Jose letter was a kind of broad invitation. I don't think it had the specificity that this offer does.
Gotcha.
So just so I get, so we would no longer be meeting here if we accepted?
No.
Those are separate decisions as to where we hold each meeting, but we would seriously consider this site on any Sacramento meetings that
Right.
that we plan to have in the future at Sacramento.
And this is just a point of clarification. This is above and beyond the facility that we're going to take a look at today. This is for use.
Correct.
When we choose to use those
Correct.
facilities.
Correct.
They have in mind meeting rooms in the legislature as they're open, which have all the facilities you need in terms of telecommunications and so on.
And recall, this was in reaction to a question that we raised about this building not being available on the weekends. So that's what they offered.
So I'm just going to, since is there a motion and a second? Yes. Okay, for discussion. You know, my only concern is this commission was set up so much in reaction to the legislature's, what were perceived as the legislature's, undemocratic process of drawing districts the last time around. I'm worried about a perception issue, so you're watching the news and you're a layperson and it says the newly minted 14-member redistricting commission met today at the state legislature to hold its hearings.
We met in the state capitol, which is owned by the citizens of the state of California.
I want discussion, but that's my only concern is that's.
But the media could frame it the way Commissioner Blanco said, even though.
It's possible. I mean, I'm not sure that we would want to necessarily have our commission meetings here, but I think as an outreach site, this is fantastic, especially since we're likely to use it on the weekend. And I think it's a great opportunity to bring the citizens of California in to see their state capital.
And I'd just like to make the point that I think it would be a mistake to make decisions and muddy the waters with what media or other perception might be. I think clearly, our goal is to be as accessible and efficient and cost-effective as possible. And simply evaluating this motion, we're saying that this opportunity provides all three of those things. That's simply all the motion on the floor is saying that we see the practicality of this and want to consider it and would consider it for future meetings.
I think the critical thing there is the word consider. If this was a motion to say we're going to do it, I might have a different vote. Yeah. But I'm happy to consider this. Why not?
Well, the thing that I have some reluctance to make a formal vote on this issue because it does appear that we are giving, even though there is a higher level of specificity in their offer, it could appear that we're giving preferential treatment to the offer from the legislature. And so if we do make a formal vote on this and, accept the consideration, we have to keep that in mind as we get offers from other places. I say this is an open process. We will get offers. I don't fully understand if we don't have an immediate need or date in mind why we do need to take a formal vote on this.
I think there's two reasons why it might be appropriate. Number one, to be able to respond to the letter. Obviously, I'm sure there's the needs for that facility and for its equipment are probably extensive. And the fact that that offer has been extended to us to be reserved for our needs, I think is rather gracious and it deserves an answer. And number two, I think that although other offers come in, this is a standing offer that's at our ready option. Again, as we know, this room has a lot of restrictions to it, and eventually we need to become independent on our own. So this provides us a solid backup plan or option, so it shows voting on it gives us a definitive option for where we can go. And then thirdly, obviously, because of some of those concerns that have been placed, this particular offer has some perceptual issues that could be attached to it. And since clearly as a body, we don't view it as a them and us situation, we're working hand in hand with the people and with the government to do what's best for all of California. I think this is a wonderful step in cementing that relationship.
Let me ask you to see if you would consider a friendly amendment to the motion. And rather than respond to this specific letter, rather direct staff to consider all of these invitations that we receive in the context of our needs, rather than a specific one. I think that would eliminate the issue of are we going to be tainted, by doing something at the invitation of the legislature.
If we're talking about standing issues for continual use, I would agree with that. That'd be fine. If we're talking about just use for a visit, that might be outside the scope of what we're considering here. We're talking about a Plan B operating facility, not just a one-time meet or visit.
I think we all share concerns about perception. I think those points are well taken. At the same time, I think we have an opportunity to focus on something a little higher, which is and I think Vince framed it very well. We're not operating in a vacuum. That's impossible. And so I think just keeping that in mind, we have the opportunity to take the high road. And I think this might even have, a positive effect of showing that, this is the work of the people, and we're better for it to take place should the need and opportunity arise than in the Capitol.
Let me add on to that statement. I think we have to remind ourselves that the state capitol is owned by the taxpayers of California. The legislature does not own that building. So this is the house of the People's Assembly, and in principle, I see nothing wrong with it.
Right. Plus, it will help us avoid a lot of costs. So.
All right, procedurally, I think there's a suggested alternate motion. I haven't heard a second on that motion.
Second.
All right. Let me ask whether Commissioner Ward would like to modify his motion. If not, then we will have to vote on the alternate motion before we can get back to the original motion.
So time for discussion?
Could we have the alternate restated? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just that we consider all invitations that we get to meet in the context of our specific needs. Of course, we're going to get a lot of invitations. We're supposed to accept every one. Let's just have a standing policy that we direct staff to consider all of them.
Direct staff to sorry, Maria.
Right, direct staff to consider all invitations that we receive to have our meetings in the context of what our needs are. And again, the virtue of this is that it responds to the legislature, or to the Capitol, but it also, we don't have to keep doing, because we should respond to everyone who I think invites us. And so I just have a general statement that we would do that.
I just feel that, again, I agree with you that I think that would be tedious and unnecessary. I just think that this particular offer has a special significance because it shows that, in fact, the legislature is trying to support this effort and is willing to support the will of the people by generously offering up facilities that we desperately need. So I just think it's worth as a commission, taking a vote on and acknowledging that we in fact did receive that offer and that we're happy to consider it, and graciously.
And I just want to say that I've been, my concerns have been allayed by the discussion of the other commission members. I'm really grateful for that. I think it is a very gracious offer, and we can take the high road. And in this budget climate, to be able to save the state of California money, and for us to take some kind of step along with everybody else who's suffering, towards a reduction in the budget, I think is a really great thing for us to do. So the only thing I would be concerned about in the offer, and it's picky, is just that they have technical staff available. I'm a little concerned about that because I think of the independence issue, that we should, not have legislative staff. But that would be the only
I think they're
thing.
referring to the video and things of that nature, and not necessarily advice of counsel.
Yeah, and this was actually in response, as Commissioner Baraba pointed out, to our discussion early on, as we're being supported by the Secretary of State, that, that we were not able to do this on weekends.
In the interest of time, would it be possible to call the vote?
Yes, let me, as the officiate of this motion, let me just clarify so that you know what you're voting on. You have the option of voting in support of the alternate motion. In other words, you can vote yes, and then when it comes to the original motion, you can also vote yes. You certainly can vote no on the alternate motion and vote yes on the original motion, or you can vote no on both of the motions. If you, for example, vote yes on the alternate motion, even though it covers the original motion to some extent, Mike Watt can certainly introduce a second motion saying that we want to respond directly to this letter and communicate directly with them in that manner. So there are many options that you can go on this. It's not just one or the other. All right, so let's vote on the alternate motion saying that we accept all the offers that are offered to the Redistricting Commission.
I don't think it was, can you
no
clarify?
No, I'm sorry, I misinterpreted. Please restate it again.
That we direct staff to consider all invitations that we receive from whatever source in the context of our needs and express our appreciation for those offers.
Is there a decision-making
Maybe I can
element
happily,
added to that?
as I say, I can happily amend then my motion if you'd like. I have no, I don't see that in conflict with my motion. So I would then amend to move that we take a vote that acknowledges that we graciously consider and appreciate the offer of use of the capital facilities and are willing to consider that, as well as directing staff to consider all options that come to us and respond in kind. Okay.
So then you're withdrawing your your motion to actually accept this offer.
The alternate motion.
I'm getting very confused.
I'm lost as to how to vote.
No, my motion did entail that we accept the offer to consider that, and we would like to reserve the right to use the facilities, to exercise that offer.
All right, I think since the original motion has been withdrawn, we now have a single motion on the floor, which is to accept offers that met our need. And
No, it's not, forget the word accept, it's to consider any offers that we receive from whatever source in the
Well-
context of what our needs are.
But it's staff considering.
That's staff to consider, right?
Okay.
It's like the staff, basically, is it not that you want the staff to keep a list so that in the future we can consider those? So staff can keep an
Precisely.
ongoing list of anyone who offers to use their facilities.
Right. It's broader than just the one. It includes the one.
All right, it's
broader
been
than
stated very carefully, and I will not try to restate it.
Actually, I think it is a little murky, really quickly. Again, the whole point of the motion, real quick, just so we understand, is that we need to let them know this particular offer, right now, this is the only offer that I'm aware of that is offering us a facility that's technologically equipped to handle the meetings of this commission. This is the only offer we have, should this room become unavailable to us to operate. And this facility has a lot of demands on it. So I believe that it is worthy of a response, that if we have perception issues and are not going to consider using this for whatever reasons, that we let them know that. I think that's the appropriate thing to do as a commission. So the vote, my motion is intended to say, yes, we graciously see this as a viable option and are putting it on our option list to use, or no, we're not going to do that. And that's it.
And all's my additional aspect was that we're going to get a number of these letters, and that should be our standing policy for this one in particular, but others as well as we shall receive over the course of the next months.
That staff should consider those, or that we should as a panel?
No, this is a staff issue. for
Okay,
me.
great. Yeah.
Okay, I may look like I totally changed course here, but I have. And I don't think they're equivalent, the different offers. I think this is the state capital, and, other people, other counties, cities, nonprofits, you name it, will make offers, and I think we should consider them. But I don't think they're on the same, they're equivalent in terms of the symbolism, and perhaps they're the same technically, but in terms of that we are a body that reflects the entire state, and that it's the state capital that's offering us these facilities. I don't think that saying we'll consider everything acknowledges what we've been discussing, which is that this is not only gracious, it's healing.
All right, let me take the
know.
approach of treating these two motions as separate motions and see if we can get through this that way. All right, the alternate motion as proposed by Commissioner Forbes, as I said, I won't attempt to restate it. If you feel you understand it, and I think most of you nod your head by showing your hand and also saying aye in support of the alternate motion. Ready?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I see no hands. Any abstain? I see no hands. So that motion passed unanimously. Now, let's consider the original motion as proposed by Commissioner Ward. All those who can support that motion, again, raise your hand and say aye.
This is accepting, right? Accepting the invitation? I'm sorry,
I'm with you, I'm not clear.
I'm not
about what
clear.
we're-
Are we?
we're on the
are we
All right,
not- we're not considering
Commissioner
it.
Ward, would you restate your motion?
My motion is that we accept to consider the capital facility as a viable option for operating, business operation.
Commissioner Ward, will you accept that
An amendment.
amendment to just say consider? Because, we may or may not ever meet in Sacramento again. If we do, and we need a facility on the weekend, this sounds like a great offer. I just don't want to commit us to meet again in Sacramento when we've talked about moving around the state.
But there's different ways you could phrase it. You could say, when we meet in Sacramento, we graciously accept the offer of your facilities. And that's really saying that when we're here and we do business in Sacramento, we'll be at the state capitol.
I know that we may or may not be.
That's even taking it further than I was going. I just simply think that we owe an answer,
Okay.
that we do in fact see this as a as an opportunity that we would absolutely consider, should we need it, or should we want it, or whatever, but we're not ruling it off, and we're certainly not doing it.
It's a simple yes, thank you, right? All right, those,
Can you clarify for me how that differs from the vote that we just took?
Certainly, because the vote we just took mandates that staff accumulate all those offers and make us aware of them and flush them out, see what's viable, what's not. This particular offer, we're responding to, again, one, because of the demands on it, so that if we decide that this is not something we will consider under any circumstance, that they can go ahead and release that room, not reserve it for us, and move on with business. And then also just to acknowledge for the public to see that, in fact, all branches of their government are reaching out to support this effort and are graciously offering us support where we need it, and that we graciously appreciate that support and are willing to consider it as we plan our course of business.
Very helpful, thank you.
ready to call for the questions?
Yes.
All right. Those who support the motion that's before us, again, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Those who oppose? All right. Abstain? All right. It's a unanimous vote. Let me, at this point, thank the commission for having me be your chair for the last few meetings, and the chair for the next meeting that's coming up in Wednesday of next week will be Vice Chair Cynthia Dye, and the new Vice Chair will be Michael Ward.
With your permission, I know that at one point we asked ourselves the question where these centers were going to be, that the statewide, so I found it, so I just thought I should put it in the record. So they're going to hold, these centers are going to be in San Diego, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Fresno, Sacramento, and Berkeley. So nothing up in the northwest, nothing in the northeast, or even north, period. It goes as far north as Sacramento. But those are the sites that they're going to be using.
I'm sure we're going to put that back on the agenda for further discussion next week. All right, once again, have a good Commissioner.
Can I just, I'm
Yes.
sorry, everyone's ready to head out. Just real fast, I mentioned to some people at lunch, and I wanted to get maybe council's feedback. I wondered, I would like to see if we as commissioners, Liz, I'd like to establish a spot that's local to myself that could be put on an agenda, a continual basis that says, if something were to come up, this is the public meeting spot for remote access. And if we all did something like that, in a situation like of Commissioner Wilkins-Weber, if that had been in place, she could have participated in these meetings. So I think it would behoove all of us to find a location that could be agendized for every meeting in a remote location.
For each of you?
Yeah, that would be just a standing location, that if something happened where we couldn't physically be at the meeting, that we could go to that spot and participate in the meeting. Because it's been noticed, it's just a standing agenda item.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, I know it might not be fun, but
No, it's not the work. It's, this is going to be an interesting agenda.
Okay, and then on just one other thing is I would wonder how we feel about, I know there was a public comment that was submitted earlier this week about someone asking, our website doesn't do a good job of saying when we're actually in session and when we're not, and so the public doesn't know what we're doing when. If there was a way, and this may be something for when we get a web person, but we need to have a better update of when we're in session and when we're not, because it just has an open agenda for a month. So it'd be nice to have that, and as well, it would be nice so that could be updated for the public, but I also think there's maybe a way for staff to update us, to summarize our meetings. So I know we've talked about some things that commissioners, for lack of a better word, or homework, but just a review of what we need to be doing for the next meeting in terms of our discussion for the next commissioner, as well as some things maybe about our outreach, but make sure that we are aware. We talk about a lot of things over a lot of number of days. It'd be helpful if it was summarized for us as well too. So summary for the public and summary for us.
Let me actually just say, I think we can do that. I need to check, because in terms of notice, the public needs to know where you are.
And then maybe the summary for for the commissioners would be just from staff to us, so it wouldn't have to be something we discuss. Is that correct? Our responsibilities.
Oh, I was just going to say, for example, this last time we put in the notice that Commissioner Galambos-Malloy would be calling in, and then she's physically here as well. So, I mean, I think it's obvious if you're here, you're here, but, you know, if you know you're going to be gone and you can set up a remote, we have a remote site, then we don't have to worry if someone gets suddenly called to a meeting that's only an hour and can, you know, can't make it to Sacramento, but can really be available for most of the meeting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we can try and work that out. I just, when you know, when you plan to be at a certain place
You can say it.
at a certain time, then people have notice. We don't want people going to a place where there's nobody there.
Correct. Once we set up a site and include it as part of the agenda, then that site has to be open and the whole time, yes. You cannot just set it up as a, just in case, and then when
But
the
is
public
it-
show up at that site, they can't use it.
Is that, so there has to be a way for the public to make a comment from that site?
If it's set up accordingly, they should be able to address this commission from that publicly announced site, yes.
But technically, in that case, then, the Columbia site should have been left open for this whole month. So are we in violation since, I mean, is it technically open?
The
I know,
location
but-
is open, the connection, the webinar connection here is not
Yeah.
up and running at this moment.
But that would be the same situation. If we had it on the agenda, that they're assuming that that's where you will be. There was no distinction to say you'll only be,
Which days?
which days you were there. So technically, that spot should be, what you're saying is if we keep an ongoing, a standing agenda location, then it has to be open for the public. But that didn't happen with what we've done so far.
To the best of our ability, at least by intent, once we put it on the agenda, we should make our best effort to make sure that that site and that,
Could council look at it for us in terms of having it as a standing agenda item for locations in case of emergency versus it being one for continual feedback? Can council see if there's a distinction made between those two?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can do that.
Just two items. First of all, where you're at has been corrected to the best, to the extent that we can correct it, that we've corrected the website to show that when you're in and when you're out. The second thing is, as far as doing the updates of the things that we've agreed to and so forth, our priorities right now are the RFPs, the RFIs, the job descriptions, and there are only two of us. So we will not have that up until we have staff, and right now we only have agreement on 3 staff, so it may be slow in running, getting us to
7.
that level. Huh?
We have agreement on 7 staff.
So that's true. I wasn't going to employ the legal counsel, but possibly that'd be a good job for legal counsel.
You're not looking at me, are you?
I am. So that's the state of where we're at.
all right, if there are no additional items, have a good trip home, and we'll see you next Wednesday. So this meeting is recessed until next Wednesday, which is the January 25th
6.
at 9:30, 26th at 9:30 a.m. Thank you very much.